Good evening.
Well,
Well, it's great to see everybody here. My name is Ryan Mears. I'm a Marion County prosecutor, and I appreciate everybody coming out on this wet night to share in night number 3 of the Community Justice Academy. The first week we kind of took a look at the grand jury process. The second week we went through a homicide case. And this week we're going to talk about our Blue Envelope program. And once again, just wanted to thank everybody for not only participating but being engaged in all 3 sessions. You have your evaluations with you, and I really do encourage you to fill out those evaluations because it lets us know how good of a job we're doing, but it also gives us ideas for what the topics for next year might look like. And so we very much want to hear your feedback and your opinions. And we want to make sure we're in a position to hopefully offer things that are meaningful and interesting to the people in this room and to the people that comprise our community. So we value the feedback, we appreciate the feedback, and would love to hear from you. There are also question cards in there. And so this presentation is going to last about 45 minutes, and we're going to do some questions. This can be questions about the presentation, or we can do Ask Me Anything. So you can fill out the question. If there's a question you were dying to ask me, please write it down on the question card, and we'll roll through there. I was trying a murder case one year, and during the course of the murder case, jurors are allowed to ask questions. And so we had a really important pivotal witness. It was our eyewitness in the case. They came up there, and the judge always says, "Does the jury have any questions?" And the judge asked, and there was a question asked, and he started laughing out loud. He said, "State, please approach." And so I walked up to the judge, and he read me the question, and the question was, "How tall is the prosecutor, the bald one?" So anything is on the table, and just for the record, I'm 6'5", but definitely want to hear your feedback and questions. So when we get into today's topic on the Blue Envelope, I'm so super excited about the presentation today for a number of reasons. One of the coolest parts about being the Marion County prosecutor is I get to work with everybody in the community, but we also have a tremendous staff. There's about 420 people who work in the prosecutor's office, and a lot of people come to the office, they have different experiences, they have different perspectives, and that's part of what makes our office so great, but also what makes our community so great is kind of the diversity of thought and the diversity of experiences that we have here. One of the challenges that we have in our community is making sure that law enforcement and the criminal justice system as a whole does a good job of establishing and building trust with people in our community. And individuals in the disability community sometimes are not always taken care of or accommodated or considered when we're making choices and decisions involving the criminal justice system. And one of those issues is, what do those interactions with law enforcement on the street look like? I can tell you, I've got a couple of friends who have kids who have autism, and one of the things that they are really, really concerned about is if they have an interaction with the police, what is that going to look like? Her son is constantly running around in sweats and a sweatshirt. Even if it's summer, he has headphones on because he loves listening to music. But if he was to encounter an officer, is he going to hear the officer's commands? And is the officer, if they command him in a certain way, could that potentially make him act in a way in which the officer could consider it to be aggressive? And so she's really concerned about what those interactions might look like, and that's a concern that's not unique to her. Other people in the community share those concerns, and it's unfortunate, but it's the reality is that unfortunately around the country we've had some incidents where individuals have been pulled over by the police. They struggle to respond to the lights and sirens, or overburdened or overloaded with all of that stimulus. The officers think they're acting in a way that's aggressive. They're not. They just can't handle all the sensory issues, and we've had some tragic situations where officers use force on people who don't pose any threat, who are not trying to cause any problems with law enforcement, but because of their particular situation, it puts them in a tough spot, and they're unable to listen or deal with or respond to the commands. And so when you see things like that happen in our community, and you see the concern with people in the community, you naturally think, what can you do to help? And is there something the Marion County Prosecutor's Office can do to make a difference to try to help facilitate this? And we feel very fortunate because we have the great Natalie Miller, who worked, put your hands up, Natalie. Give Natalie a hand. So Natalie is in charge of our Different But Not Less initiative that was started under former prosecutor Terry Curry. And what she did and what we did is we had a conversation about what could we do to help and what could we do to make a difference. And there's a program called the Blue Envelope Program where individuals can request the blue envelope if they have autism or if they have that concern that if they're pulled over from the police and it might potentially lead to a difficult situation. This blue envelope immediately notifies the police about what the person is going through, what they're dealing with. And Natalie was just absolutely essential in spearheading this program and making sure that it was a success. And she was able to do that. And I always tell people, everybody's got great ideas, it's how you execute those ideas. And she flawlessly executed that idea, partnering up not only with IMPD, but the ARC of Indiana to make sure that we could have as big an impact on as many people as possible. And so I'm very proud of this program today because it addresses a specific need. It addresses a population in our community that is sometimes overlooked. And it also helps raise awareness that all of us need to be conscientious of everybody in our community. And so with that, we have formal introductions. It's going to be weird to read this about Natalie because I know her so well, but she began as an undergraduate intern in January of 2016 at the Marion County Prosecutor's Office. She spent 6 years working in the criminal division as a paralegal before being promoted to her current position, where she's the constituent service coordinator. She's the co-founder and director of our Different Not Less initiative, which she started alongside former prosecutor Terry Curry. She's a 7th generation Hoosier. She earned her bachelor's degree from Franklin College in 2014. And she is getting her master's of public affairs from IU Indianapolis in December. Congratulations on that, Natalie. Natalie was diagnosed with autism at age 4. She's been a disability advocate for 20 years and has collaborated with many organizations across the state of Indiana during that time. While she's not working, Natalie enjoys cooking, learning new skills and crafts, singing with the Indianapolis Arts, and spending time with family, friends, and her cat, Ivy. One of my favorite coworkers, someone I'm absolutely thrilled to introduce, my good friend Natalie Miller. So we also are very fortunate to be joined by, how do I pronounce your last name?
Everybody just says Carly because my last name is Shortino Poulter.
We're going to go with Carly.
Yep.
All right. Carly is the director of the ARC Advocacy Network, also known as the ARC of Indiana. She oversees the family advocacy programs around the state, working on public policy, increasing opportunities for self-advocates, and helping families navigate various government programs and connecting them to community resources. She's a graduate of IU Bloomington School of Journalism and the College of Arts and Sciences Political Science Department. Through her work at the ARC, Carly sits on several committees, boards, and commissions, including the statewide transition work group, the supported decision-making state plan work group, the Indiana State Adult Guardian Task Force, and the Marion County Reentry Coalition. She also sits on the board of directors for both the Indiana Alliance for Prenatal Substance Exposure Board of Directors and the Guardianship Association of Indiana. She works closely with state agencies to help families navigate various systems and to ensure policies are self-advocate and family-friendly. Most importantly, Carly is the mother of a 25-year-old son with autism and anxiety who is growing into an incredible adult, and a 19-year-old son with ADHD, depression, and a wicked sense of humor. This experience as a parent gives her a unique perspective for input with government agencies and allows her to speak with families as peers who experience many of the same situations they do. Just an aside about the ARC of Indiana. We're fortunate to work with a lot of different groups here, not only in the city of Indianapolis, but the state. And I cannot say enough great things about the advocacy work that they do, and also just help educating the general public about some of the challenges and limitations that we sometimes impose upon different people and different groups of people. And you know, it's very important that we give people the opportunity to be successful, and we don't always do that. And the ARC is just an outstanding advocate on behalf of individuals who contribute so much to our city and our state. They just need the opportunity, and the ARC help makes that possible. And so I'm just personally grateful for all the work that the ARC does. And so with that, I will turn it over to Miss Natalie Miller so she can start us in her presentation. Natalie, take it away.
Thank you, Prosecutor Mears, for the introduction, and good evening, everybody, and welcome to the third night of the Community Justice Academy, where we will be discussing disability and criminal justice, in addition to our Blue Envelope program, which the Blue Envelope program has been a very big undertaking for our office and is a continuation of our ongoing Different Not Less initiative, which I mentioned it was established in August of 2016 and has two primary objectives: providing internship and employment opportunities to individuals with disabilities and increasing general disability awareness and education in Marion County. And the Blue Envelope is a continuation of that second objective. And I know what some people might be thinking: what the heck does disability have to do with criminal justice, and why is this something we should care about? Well, you're about to find out. It's trivia time! Okay, here is what's gonna happen. On the next few slides, I've got 4 multiple choice questions, 3 answers each. I'm gonna read them to you, and you are all gonna pick an answer. Hopefully by then you'll have a slightly better understanding on why this is a matter of concern for our office. Sure, I could just give you the answers like a normal person, but what fun is that? Okay, without further ado, let's go. Question 1, what percent of Marion County residents under the age of 65 has a disability? Is it A, 7.5%, B, 10.4%, or C, 13.6%?
C.
The correct answer is B, 10.4%, and this is according to the United States Census Bureau. Sources for all the statistics I'm about to mention will be at the bottom of the answer page. And I could not find a county-specific stat for those 65 and older, but generally speaking, the number for people in that age group is anywhere from 30 to 40%. And the Marion County represents nearly 1 million people, so and we need to make sure that we're representing and advocating for our citizens as best as possible. So disability is something that cannot and should not be ignored, especially with its relation to criminal justice, which we'll get to in a moment. Question 2, fill in the blank. People with disabilities are victimized in violent crime at a time nearly blank greater rate than those without disabilities. Is it A, 4 times greater, B, 3 times greater, or C, 2.5 times greater?
A.
C.
The correct answer is A, 4. More specifically, the rate of victimization for violent crime is 46.2 per 1,000 versus 12.4 per 1,000 for those without disabilities. So needless to say, coming across a victim with a disability as a prosecutor, paralegal, whatever, it's a matter of when it's going to happen. It is not a matter of if. And so prosecutors need to be aware of how having a disability could make someone more susceptible and how this might require them to need extra supports. Victim advocates need to be aware of this for largely the same reason. Question 3, what percent of incarcerated Americans have a psychiatric or non-psychiatric disability? Is it 36% of men and 43% of women, 52% of men and 68% of women, or 65% of men and 80% of women?
B.
The correct answer is C. Now keep in mind, this study, psychiatric disability includes mental illnesses like schizophrenia, bipolar disorder, anxiety, etc. So there's a little bit of, so depending on who, mental illness and disability, there's a bit of a difference there that we don't have time to get into, but what this means is that most people who find themselves in the criminal justice system have some sort of condition or mental health issue so again, understanding the factors that put these individuals more at risk of finding themselves in the system and figuring out how to maybe fulfill those needs so they don't reoffend if and where possible is vital. And question 4, last one. Paying disabled workers below minimum wage is legal in most U.S. states as per Section 14C of the Fair Labor Standards Act of 1938. How many states have passed legislation banning sub-minimum wages? Is it A, 16, B, 19, or C, 24? The correct answer is A, 16 states, and it may or may not surprise you to know Indiana is not one of those 16 states. Yeah, up until I'd say about 5 or 6 years ago, I didn't even know this was a thing, but there are 2 groups where it is completely legal to pay below working wages: the incarcerated and people with disabilities who receive 14C certificates. With both come into play here, and needless to say, not making a living wage comes with all sorts of societal discrepancies that put people in a more vulnerable position. Carly, is there anything you want to add, or any other facts or stats that you feel the audience ought to know before we move on?
Thank you, Natalie. So the reality is people with disabilities wind up becoming involved with the justice system in so many more different ways than people realize. You know, they are at greater risk of being the victims of a crime. In fact, you may have seen on the news 2 days ago, up in Kokomo, a man was convicted of sexually assaulting a person with Down syndrome who was nonverbal. And that's the reason why so often there's greater involvement, is because when you have somebody who can't speak or who has difficulty communicating, it's that much easier to commit a crime against them. When you have somebody who doesn't know how to express themselves, or who gets really intimidated when they are around authority figures, or, for example, when there's a police car and there are, you know, you've got the lights and you may have had a siren and all of that, that can wind up causing more issues. And that's why the programs that Marion County has implemented, and especially Blue Envelope, but a lot of the other programs that Marion County has implemented are so vital to making sure that people with disabilities are treated appropriately, are treated respectfully, and are treated the way they should be treated. And whether that's, you know, they are being investigated for committing a crime, or maybe or if they are alleged to be the victim of a crime, making sure that they are communicated with appropriately is going to get better answers, more accurate answers, and better results.
Thank you very much. Now that this hopefully got your attention, we'll move on to the main portion of the presentation again. Before we get into Blue Envelope specifically, I want to give everyone an overview of more in depth on how disability intersects with the criminal justice system, and some things we ought to consider it's because understanding these things helps us to build these programs better. Okay, first, one thing important to emphasize is that disabilities come in all forms, and if you want to get as binary as possible, there's physical disabilities that affect the body, and neurological, which affect the brain. But even within those, there are tons of further categories, and not to mention there are plenty of disabilities such as Down syndrome that are both. So a lot of times people, I'll get to that point in a sec, disabled from birth versus becoming disabled, which I've noticed in some cases can affect attitude. For example, some people who lose their hearing over time due to age are often very keen on getting hearing aids because they're accustomed to having hearing as a means of communication, and they don't want to lose that. But many people who are born deaf or become deaf at a very, very young age, especially those who go to like a deaf school, learn American Sign Language and have those accommodations, not only can they thrive without those aids, a lot of times they don't want them because there's almost a subculture of sorts that comes with that experience. So granting them the ability to hear is taking them away from that. Visible versus invisible. If there's anything I want to emphasize, it's this one. You cannot tell a person's disability status just by looking at them. I think when many people think of disabilities, they tend to think of the more visible forms. Wheelchair users, individuals with Down syndrome who often have the very distinguishing facial features. But again, invisible disabilities are just as real and just as valid. No category is inherently better or worse, and if you'll pardon this note of gloom, it's important to emphasize that disability, unlike race or sexual orientation, which are kind of set in stone and immutable, a person's disability status can change at any time. So even if this isn't an issue for you or someone you care about now, there's a very good chance it will be. Most of us have at the very least dealt with a parent or grandparent who's lost their mobility, their vision, or or hearing to one degree or another over time. And then, to kind of put our current issues into context, I'm gonna give some points on disabilities and how they've been treated in America. Needless to say, prior to the 20th century, survival of the fittest was a lot more primal than it is today. A lot of times if you couldn't fend for yourself, you or didn't have a strong immune system when there was a plague broken out, you died. And disabilities were often seen as either shunned or something to be pitied, a group of people you should give your time and money to. Like, at least your life isn't as bad as these folks, no matter how hard things. In which, needless to say, that's a fairly archaic way to look at disabilities. And I think the more nowadays we see disability as a naturally occurring fact of life rather than this big, scary thing, then the better we can approach these issues. Then 20th century, there were a lot of eugenics policies. I know a lot of people think, some people want to think that this didn't exist outside Nazi Germany around this time, but it was in America too. Maybe not on as grand of a scale, but a lot of these individuals were put in institutions, and it was legal to or at the very least not enforced, sterilizing them against their will, essentially removing them from the gene pool. But after World War II, some things happened to get us to where we're at today. A lot of these people saw these institutions and how cruel the conditions were, so they started closing down in droves. And while I'd say that's generally a good thing, it came with new obstacles. Many of the individuals released from these facilities did not have the money, skills, or social ability to adapt in polite society, so they found themselves in more bad situations over time. Around the same time, medical advancements were being made, so people were living longer in old age and therefore more likely to get disabilities accompanying those, and conditions of various sorts also started getting longer life expectancies. Back in the 70s and 80s, the life expectancy of someone with Down syndrome was about 30 years, and many died much younger. Now, the life expectancy for this group is close to 60, which, again, I'd say it's mostly a good thing, but it's coming with new challenges. With more of them living to these ages, most parents are not outliving these children, so they have to worry about arranging aftercare should they die and they're not around to take them. And Carly, we were talking earlier this week, and you brought up another challenge that Down syndrome individuals are facing now. Would you be able to explain that?
I will. So, the good news is people with disabilities are living longer because they did have incredibly short life expectancies, not that long ago. But in living longer, we're also learning some new things. So for example, let's talk about individuals with Down syndrome. One of the things they've learned as individuals with Down syndrome are actually living longer lives is that 25% of people with Down syndrome will develop Alzheimer's by the age of 40. 50% will develop it by the age of 60. And with Down syndrome, it presents a little bit differently. So with a non-disabled person, when they develop Alzheimer's, there's about a 20-year difference between the time of diagnosis and the time they pass away. With an individual with Down syndrome, it's only 7 years. So once they've got that Alzheimer diagnosis, their life expectancy is much shorter. But as a result of all of this, individuals with Down syndrome are actually taking part in more research, including clinical trials of Alzheimer's treatment options as well. And so we're actually able to use our experiences with people with Alzheimer's or with people with Down syndrome who have Alzheimer's to inform how we address that just as a broader society. And also, because this is such a frequent issue, places like the Alzheimer's Association of Indiana have actually developed specific support groups for caregivers of individuals who have both Alzheimer's and Down syndrome. And so those are the types of things that we don't necessarily think about, but do actually have a big thing. One of the other things is, just the massive increase in the prevalence rates of autism. When I was a kid, and I'm 49 years old, when I was a kid, autism affected about 1 out of every, and I can't remember if it's 2,500 or 25,000 children. And whenever you hear an autism prevalence rate, They're looking at the number of 8-year-olds who have a medical diagnosis, okay? My son is now 25. When he was diagnosed, it was 1 in 166 kids. Today it's 1 in 31. So we're having big increases in this. And as a result of that, we do have more people who know somebody, who have a more personal connection. Everybody knows somebody who's got a loved one with autism in their life now. You know, and as a result, we're able to recognize the value of people with disabilities. We're able to make adjustments because we want to make life better for people.
Thank you very much for, and I'm only 33, but I can definitely say that the prevalence, and I've seen a large shift in like how disabilities are discussed even over the course of my own life, which I'll touch on that in a bit. And around the time of the medical advancements, around the same time period, the growth of disability rights movement began to emerge. People were essentially saying, hey, you let us out of these institutions, but we're still suffering all of these consequences and are not receiving adequate support. And a lot of hard work eventually culminated in the Americans with Disabilities Act of 1990, which, among other things, made it illegal to discriminate in the workforce a candidate or employee solely on the basis of having a disability, provided they could do said job with or without reasonable accommodations. And if there's anything else I want to say about the ADA, is that it's not the end-all be-all. It's not like this law was passed, everything is good. It was an important milestone, but we've still got a long way to go. And resources being ADA compliant, or buildings being ADA compliant, is not like the pinnacle of accessibility. It's if you ask most accessibility experts, it's kind of the bare bones in making something. There's a lot more suggestions in making places and technology more adaptive, but that's a discussion for another day. Now, and as we alluded to during the pop quiz, people with disabilities are far more likely to be victims in almost every area of crime, and these crimes are also less likely to be reported. The report I cited for the crime statistic is actually very interesting. It goes in depth on a lot of these discrepancies, and it also talks about how people with some different kinds of disabilities are more victimized than others. More specifically, those with intellectual and developmental disabilities tend to be victimized at especially high rates because, in addition to those vulnerabilities, depending on how significant the intellectual disability is, they may not even recognize that they're in some sort of danger until if and when force is used. And unfortunately, one other thing that report cited is that compared to people without disabilities, people with disabilities are much more likely to be attacked by someone who knew them and less likely to be attacked by a total stranger, aka they're more likely to be victimized by someone who knows their disability status, knows their vulnerability, and that unfortunately not all caregivers are fit to do so. Many of people are victimized by those who should be helping them get their needs met, and there's more concerns for this, especially in regards to the elderly. With people living longer and the birth rate where it is, our population as a whole is aging rapidly, and that industry of care workers is under immense stress. People are quitting because they can't handle the pressure, low pay, all the reasons that people usually cite for quitting their jobs, they apply here, so there's a lot of concerns. And another thing to keep in mind is that disabled people are also far more likely to face poverty and social isolation, which further adds to their vulnerability. If you don't have a lot of money and don't go to work with other people, don't go to school, don't have friend groups, then there's fewer people who might notice that something is going on. And that's part of why creating more opportunities for people with disabilities to participate in the community is so important. And again, the pop quiz also alluded that the people with disabilities are also more likely to find themselves on the other side of the criminal justice system. And again, poverty and social isolation feed into this as well. If you're under a lot of stress financially, aren't getting your medical needs, especially mental health needs met, and don't have a lot of functioning supportive social circles, then you're far more likely to lash out in ways that could get you in big trouble. And Carly, I know when we discussed this, you talked about lack of appropriate supports and therapies. Could you discuss how this feeds in to this?
Absolutely. So there are a lot of factors that go into why a person with a disability may commit a crime. And some of those factors include things like exploitation. So, one of the realities is that most people with intellectual and developmental disabilities do not have a very robust social network outside of paid supports. And so I once had a psychologist say something that has always stuck with me. People with intellectual disabilities are not at risk because of their intellectual disability. They're at risk because of loneliness. So then you have people take advantage of that loneliness. Oh, hey, I'm gonna be your friend. Hey, can you go take this package over to my other friend across town? And you just made him a drug mule. Things like that, where they just wanna have a friend. They just wanna be around people. And there are people who can absolutely take advantage of that. One of the other things too is that it is incredibly difficult for someone with an intellectual or developmental disability to get appropriate mental health treatment. And about 50% of people who have an intellectual or developmental disability also have mental illness. Now that can be something as common as anxiety or depression, but it can also be more severe types of mental illness like schizoaffective disorder or bipolar disorder or things like that. Now imagine you've got somebody with schizoaffective disorder and they can't find a mental health professional willing to treat them because they have autism. Guess what? Autism is not cooties, it's not contagious, but we need to be able to treat both of those conditions. And it can absolutely be done, but it is that much harder for people with IDD to be able to find that mental health treatment. And if you're not getting appropriate mental health treatment, your chances of having more difficulty, of acting out, of not being able to regulate your emotions or your behavior increases, and so does your chance of getting involved with the justice system as a result.
Thank you very much. On that, again, I know we touched earlier on lack of disability awareness among law enforcement, which is a large reason why we instated blue envelope. People with disabilities are also more likely to be affected by police violence, which we all know has become quite the hot button issue in the last decade and a half as more high profile cases have reached the public news. And here's another thing. If a person is incarcerated and they're on either disability or Social Security, if you're incarcerated for more than 30 days, then you're not getting that payment that month. And if you're incarcerated for more than a year, you're essentially kicked off the program and have to reapply all over again, which makes it even harder for these individuals to get the support that they need. Now that we've kind of given an overview on how disability intersects, this feeds into different, not less, which, before we get into blue envelope, I kind of want to discuss how our office got to this point in the first place. And in talking about different, not less, I can't really talk about it without talking about my story and how I ended up at the office. And to understand this, we're gonna have to take a little time travel trip all the way back to the 1990s. Yep, that is if you hadn't put it together already, that is a picture of a much, much younger me with just in my little Barney the dinosaur smock coloring Easter eggs. As I mentioned earlier, I'm 33 years old. I was born in February of 1992, and I was diagnosed with autism when I was 4, so just about the age of the little girl you see in that picture. I always knew that I wanted to go to college, get a job, and essentially lead a normal life, but expectations and everything were very different back then. But again, the autism diagnosis rate was much lower, so unless your life was personally affected by it, most people had not even heard of autism, much less knew how it affected people. There were no public awareness efforts. There was nothing in the media depicting it unless you want to count something like Rain Man, which is very stereotypical of the savant syndrome type of autism. Many of the big awareness charities did not exist yet. And kind of the de facto prognosis given to you back then, unless you were one of those genius types, was don't expect him or her to live independently, don't expect them to graduate school. My parents were told all kinds of things. Growing up, and I was none the wiser to this for most of my childhood. I became acutely aware I was different somehow around the time I was like, the time I started kindergarten, and again, I've been advocating in some capacity for 20 years. I did my first project when I was 12 years old and in middle school, after realizing disability programs weren't getting the same attention as their kind of school-sponsored equivalents. So I recruited the cheerleaders in my grade to help me spread awareness for Special Olympics, and everything just kind of snowballed from there. And to make a long story short, not to toot my own horn, but I've done basically everything that those doctors said I wouldn't do. I finished high school, I got decent grades. I think an A- average. I went to college, but faced a new obstacle after I graduated. After I had my bachelor's, I naively assumed people wouldn't hold my autism diagnosis against me and I'd get a job right away. Oh, how wrong was I. It took me 2 years, but 2 years separated me graduating Franklin and securing my job at the office. And somewhere in between, I realized my bachelor's wasn't getting me anywhere, so I decided to get a paralegal studies certificate at IUND. And I loved studying the law and everything during that time. And for my final semester, I knew I wanted to do an internship. My academic advisor listed all the places people with my specialty got internships, and the one that stood out the most was the Marion County Prosecutor's Office. I was accepted. And that whole process was a whirlwind. I interviewed for my internship 3 days before Christmas, in 2015, got my offer the very next day and started on January 4th, so there was not much transition time at all. And from the minute I started working, I absolutely loved it. I was going through a pretty bad depressive period in the months leading up to that, and I just felt so much more of a sense of purpose and belonging from working at this place. And a couple months into my internship, I happened to meet Prosecutor Curry by chance. We were at an event for Best Buddies, which he was involved with prior to me joining the office. And I decided, okay, if I see him, I'll just play it cool. But after learning this information, my brother scoped him out and brought him directly to me, because of course he did. We talked, and I think I was hired not long after that, and my life was pretty much forever changed. I don't not know what it was that Prosecutor Curry saw in me, but everything he did for me single-handedly changed the trajectory of my life, and I'm very blessed that I get to continue to share that good fortune with other people. And I started the internship in January, was hired in April. A couple months into my employment, I had a chance encounter with him. He was talking to another attorney, and afterwards I decided to send him an email talking about how much I appreciated everything and the challenges people with autism face in employment. To my surprise, he sent an email back saying, among other things, let me know if there's anything I can do to help you raise awareness for disability employment. His stepdaughter, Grace, had Down syndrome, so making sure her having that independence and community was something that he cared about. And we got to talking that week, and really the idea of creating an initiative was his, but we kind of decided what we wanted to do. A couple weeks in, I gave it a name, we launched it, and though I'd say it took a couple years for us to find our footing, this generated a lot of news, because disability was not talked about much at all in the legal community back then, unless you specifically went into disability law. And eventually led to that article you see there on the screen. The Indianapolis Bar Association interviewed us. I have that newspaper framed in my office. It's, I'd say, my most prized possession in there. And again, Blue Envelope is by far our biggest undertaking, but it's hardly the only one. I just want to share a couple other things we've done prior to that. The first kind of community event we did was the Best Buddies Friendship Walk, which is held in the last Sunday of April in Military Park downtown. We've done this every single year from 2017 onward, excluding 2020 for obvious reasons. And again, going back to the very first point of different, not less, though this took a little bit more time, we began recruiting interns from supported employment organizations such as New Hope of Indiana, Best Buddies Indiana, and Easter Seals Crossroads. One of these individuals was actually hired on by our office as a permanent employee back in 2021. He's still there to this day, does incredible work. We've built inter-office disability education and programming. This presentation right here is actually a slightly modified version of a lunch and learn I put together for our interns every summer, and that was a modified version of a CLE presentation I've done a couple times in tandem with Indiana Disability Rights. And we've made quite a few community collaborations. One of them being the Cheese and Thank You food truck sponsored by New Hope of Indiana. It is a mac and cheese food truck where the food is prepared, served, and all the money is managed exclusively by some of their clients who have disabilities. We have them visit every single year. We frequently go to Howdy's Homemade Ice Cream, which is downtown Indy, on the same building as Needler's Fresh Market, again, staffed almost entirely by individuals with intellectual and developmental disabilities. And one of our newest additions is the Rise Learning Center Food Drive, which technically this is part of the outreach team's programming, but I decided to include it here anyway. The Rise Learning Center is a special education focused school on the south side of town that takes kids from, I believe, 3 different school districts on the south side who need accommodations, and it provides a place where they can get more specialized assistance, and whether they have such significant disabilities that the school can't accommodate them, or whether it's people who are experiencing behavioral issues with the goal to transition them back into their district school. And they have a food bank there, as a lot of these families have issues financially, so we've been doing that every March. It's always very rewarding. And then we're moving on to Blue Envelope. This, again, has been our biggest undertaking yet. I know Prosecutor Mears introduced this generally. This was not just our office's project. This was in collaboration with the Indy Metropolitan Police Department and the Arc of Indiana. Both of them were on board pretty much immediately when we took this on. And we're also not the first people to do this. This has previously been established in several jurisdictions nationwide, several big cities, and on the statewide level in Massachusetts. That's the Massachusetts chapter of this was my main reference point in doing research early on for this. And I looked, there is no like centralized Blue Envelope agency or anything. Each jurisdiction kind of just does it to that issues like anything. Each jurisdiction just kind of establishes it on its own, and then so if you look at our Blue Envelopes versus those in other jurisdictions, the design is going to be slightly different. Logos for their law enforcement or prosecuting agencies. And the main objective of this program is to make traffic stops safer and more efficient for drivers with disabilities. And traffic stops often accompany very overwhelming stimuli like blaring sirens and bright lights, which can be very overwhelming, especially if you do not know why you are being pulled over. And this, especially if for disabilities that accompany sensory issues, this can be extremely overwhelming, and if you're in that high stress situation, you may not always be able to communicate effectively. You might have to take some time to process what's going on, and unfortunately, in some circumstances, to the untrained eye, it's easy for people to mistake this behavior for you acting out on purpose and or being intoxicated, and that can lead to all kinds of negative outcomes. So this envelope is something that is designed to clip to your car visor for easy access. It not only provides a place to keep essential documents you might need, like your registration, a list of emergency contacts, maybe a copy of your driver's license, but also has language on it communicating directly to the officer, hey, this person has a disability and may not react to X, Y, and Z the way you might expect. Also gives people a place to put their emergency contact if something goes wrong, and any specifications on their disability. So if they have autism, or maybe they have a heart problem or that acts up when they're under stress, it provides information for all of that, opening a channel of communication that otherwise might not be opened. And it includes instructions for the driver as well to make sure things go smoothly as possible. For example, wait until you have explicit permission to leave. Don't just assume that because they step away from the car that you're free to go. And again, this launched in April of 2025. We have so far just been mailed out 470 envelopes through request office. 400, and this is as of Monday of this week, so very recent. 468 of these have been mailed out to 85 cities and counties across cities and towns across the state of Indiana. 2 were mailed out of state, 1 to Arizona and 1 to Florida. Social media's reach is pretty amazing. At least 46 counties have been represented as well. And the reason I say at least is because there were a few cities that technically cross county lines, and in these cases, I don't know which of the 2 counties the request is coming from. So it could be as low as 46, could be as high as 48, depending on that specification. And I do not know why I have that bullet point under counties as opposed to cities, but of all the places we track, Indianapolis has requested by far the most envelopes. 270 have come from Indianapolis. And if you like more visual aid, I have attached for your kid. This is a map showing where in Indiana all the requests are coming from. As you can, each dot on this map of Indiana indicates a city or a town where we have distributed at least 1 envelope. As you can see, even though it's largely concentrated in central Indiana, we get them from all over this state, and I've also color-coded them. Black dots indicate cities or towns where we've sent between 1 and 5. Green dots indicate 6 to 10. Red, 11 or more. The red dot in the middle of Marion County is obviously Indianapolis, and as you can see, nearly all the towns that have requested larger numbers are around that area, with Fort Wayne being the predominant outlier. And we've been tracking this to showcase the outreach of our program. And as I mentioned earlier, this opens the channel of communication between drivers and law enforcement, which is not only to protect the driver, but also should hopefully save law enforcement a lot of time, especially these days when police misconduct is under a microscope. No law enforcement agency wants to be at the center of something really, of a big investigation, or do something that could potentially attract destructive protesting. And then, even though this is not going to fix absolutely everything, we're hoping that this will be a stepping stone for preparing the law-damaged relationship between disabled citizens and law enforcement here in Indiana. And as the map illustrated, what we do here in Indianapolis does not just affect us, it has a ripple effect on the entire state, particularly the donut counties immediately surrounding Marion. Harley, I know you've got a few points you'd like to talk about here as well.
Thank you. So, as Natalie said, one of the biggest benefits of the blue envelope is it is a quick, immediate visual cue that, hey, we've got somebody with a disability in this car. And so right away, that makes everybody more aware. I tend to joke that people with intellectual and developmental disabilities are the purple sparkly unicorns of the world, because they can qualify for all sorts of different supports and break all the regular rules of the process. Well, this also kind of applies in this situation too, because police officers are used to dealing with certain things over and over and over again. When they see an individual whose mobility is impaired, who may be maybe unsteady in how they walk. When they hear them and their speech sounds slurred or definitely sounds like the speech is impaired, what's their first thought? Their first thought, yeah, their first thought is they're drunk or they're on some substance. Not, this is a person with cerebral palsy who also has impaired mobility, may have impaired speech. And it's not that they are, inebriated in any way. That is simply their disability. By having that blue envelope, that's putting that officer on notice, oh, hey, wait, this may not be what you think it is. And so it makes them investigate a little more, ask some other questions, and more importantly, be open that something may be different here. And so it's just a quick and very effective visual cue for that. What I will also say though is, and we tend to talk about the perspective of people with disabilities, which is essential, don't get me wrong. But I will also say from a parent perspective or from a family perspective, knowing that we've got that blue envelope, knowing we have that visual cue, makes the family feel safer about the individual being out on their own, about the individual attempting to drive on their own, because it's that sense of safety. And as a result, it allows more family support in making sure that that individual can become more independent and can do more things, whether it's work, whether it's go meeting friends, things that we all get to take for granted, but people with disabilities don't necessarily get to take that for granted. And so it gives a lot of peace of mind, not only to the individual, but also to their families. And then finally, one of the things is we're seeing a lot of excitement over this. Indianapolis is one of, I believe, 7 communities in Indiana who use the Blue Envelope program. And back in August, and no, I can't tell you beyond one other community, which it does, but back in August we did a webinar called Ask the ARC, where Natalie was coming on to talk about the Blue Envelope program. And I think we probably had about 45 minutes worth of questions from the people who were on that, and as a result, they got a huge explosion in the number of requests, and that's part of why you see some of those outlying requests in other counties, is because this is something that was virtual, and we have people all across the state of Indiana who take part in this, but you're seeing excitement for this. You're seeing excitement at the possibilities of what this can do, especially when it comes to increasing people's independence.
Absolutely. I know we definitely got an influx of requests for envelopes following the conclusion of that webinar back in August, and just having that level of assurance can bring a lot of peace of mind, not just to the individual but like you said, also the families. I've heard from quite a few of the requests are from parents on the individual's behalf. And then even though we're very happy with how this turned out and intend to keep it going, obviously part of progress is to keep moving forward. So one thing we definitely need to continue to is promoting this to the public. The largest influxes of requests always seem to coincide with when we either post about it online or talk about this. Of those 470 envelopes, over 300 of them, those requests came in the first week after we launched it officially on social media, and Prosecutor Mears and I were interviewed on TV for that. That generated a lot of interest, and again, influx after the webinar. And we've also gotten a couple different requests from people wanting to establish jurisdictions of Blue Envelope within the state outside Marion County. And Carla, I'll let you talk about this in a minute, but I know it was actually on the docket during the state legislative session earlier this year, but was turned down in favor of something else. So making this an option, even though we will send an envelope to anybody who requests it, I would like to see it expand outside Marion County for more law enforcement agencies to get involved. And then also just continue creating community connections with individuals and organizations. I'm a firm believer that the greatest asset Marion County has is its people and all the perspectives and talents they bring with them. So the more we can use that to our advantage, the better off I think all of us will be. Carly?
And so when we talk about next steps, some of the things we want to make sure is that both law enforcement and 911 dispatchers are actually trained in disabilities and understanding disabilities, so that dispatchers can make sure to let responders know, but then also so that law enforcement knows that what they're walking into, or recognizes, oh hey, wait, this person's acting in a certain way. This person may have a disability, so that they know how to appropriately interact with that individual, so that they can get the best information possible from them and have the most effective interaction possible with them. We also want to make sure that law enforcement have the resources and supports available to them in really difficult situations. Marion County is unique because we've got some incredible programs here. So for example, we have the Mobile Crisis Assessment Team, which is I'm seeing a lot of head nods, you guys know about this, but it's a police officer, a clinician from Eskenazi, and an EMT who can respond when there's a 911 call. We've got the Behavioral Health Unit, who take a more proactive approach to those individuals who may be frequent users of 911 or emergency services, to check in on them so that they're actually getting the supports they need, rather than have to rely on 911 services. But making sure that law enforcement have the support so that they know, oh hey, we've got this situation, who can we call, who can we talk to figure out what's going on, especially when it comes to things like interviewing individuals and things like that, if they knew who they could contact. And so one of the resources in the Blue Envelope are resources that are available in Marion County, whether it's for the individual or whether for police officers. We also want to use this to help build relationships and increase understanding with the disability community, and then spread this out throughout the state. We've got this huge amount of interest and excitement. Let's make sure we're using that, because this benefits everyone.
Oh, we appreciate everybody coming out today. I hope after this, everyone has a better idea of why For Not Less and Blue Envelope have been undertaken by the Marion County Prosecutor's Office, and why this ought to be a matter of interest to anybody working in the criminal justice system. And very grateful to Carly for joining us here today. She and the Arc of Indiana have been incredible in helping us get this established. And do you have anything else you want to add?
I want to thank you for
doing this session on disability. I want to thank all of you for wanting this topic to actually be covered, because it's something that is so easily overlooked, and because you guys actually help shape what topics are going to be discussed. Thank you for doing that. And Prosecutor Mears, thank you, because you have been absolutely amazing in making sure that people with disabilities are treated fairly, are treated with dignity and respect, and with an open mind. Thank you very much for that.
References, and then thank you all very much for coming.
You're not off the hook yet, Natalie. We might have some questions. Okay. So, first of all, can we give it up for both Natalie and Carly?
Yeah.
So Michael and Booker are gonna collect the question sheet. So if you have a question sheet, if you just want to hold it up in the air, Michael and Booker will get it before our esteemed panelists take off. You might have a couple questions, Natalie, so you're not quite done. Just as a reminder, after we complete the question and answer part of this program, we'll move on to one of my favorite times, which is handing out the certificates and the t-shirts to everyone.
And I also want to say I've got both mine and Carly's emails on the site, so if we don't get to your question or want to reach out to us, feel free to either take a picture of that slide, write our emails down, and we will get back to you as soon as we can.
And then we also have a sign-up sheet if you want the Blue Envelope program. If you're looking for a Blue Envelope, we have the sign-up sheet in the back of the room.
Yeah, we've got a sign-up sheet. But again, for our purpose, we are counting where our envelopes go, so there will be a space where you can fill out the city and county in which you reside, so we can update our charts. Please, like I said, please provide us with that information so our data is as complete as possible. But in the envelope, we've also got instructions on how to use it and some other information.
this looks like a good crew. It looks like we got some great questions here. Okay, so I'm going to start with a couple of questions for our panelists here. We talked about the Blue Envelope program for people who are drivers. Do we have a similar program or something that can be used for people who are bus riders, bicyclists, and walkers in our community? I'll start with you, Carly.
That is a great idea. In all honesty, other than, individuals having, stickers of some sort or something like that, on like a backpack or something like that, I don't know of anything like that. I will say that a few years ago, we passed legislation that would allow individuals to get a special marker on their ID to recognize that they are a person with a disability. That would be something that would be completely optional if they wanted to do that. And the county health departments were supposed to be working on that, and then COVID happened. So, that put a lot of things on hold. In this last legislative session, Natalie was talking about, blue envelope. There was legislation about blue envelope, and the legislature did not pass that in favor of something else, which is a yellow dot that you can put on the window of your car to notify first responders that, hey, somebody in this car has a medical issue, so that they may know, oh, hey, wait, if they come across a car accident, we may have somebody who had a heart attack or a seizure or a stroke or something along those lines. But
Did they pass that?
they passed the yellow dot.
Okay.
So, but as far as something for bicyclists or something like that, not that I know of. But I'm also thinking you could probably use blue envelope with that too.
Any kind of a yellow dot? Or do you
No,
get
it's going to be like a specific decal that I believe the county health departments will have available. So, but that just passed, so it's not ready yet.
Yeah, and I don't know of anything specific to those circumstances, but I don't see how you couldn't use a blue envelope. In fact, I remember we got a question a couple months ago if there was something equivalent for people to carry in their handbag or to keep around at home in case they had an encounter with law enforcement, and I largely have the same answer. I don't see how this couldn't be applied there, but I can't name any specific programming for those circumstances. And these are great questions. It's been giving our office a lot to think about in terms of expanding this so we can serve our citizens to the best of our ability.
So this next question is for me. Do you always wear sneakers, and do you wear sneakers to court? Yes and yes. I tell you what, so I grew up on the west side of Indianapolis, loved basketball, loved Jordans. My mom was a Catholic school teacher growing up, and so I never got Jordans when I was a kid. And I always said to my parents, I said, when I get a job, the first thing I'm doing is buying a pair of Jordans. And guess what? I held myself to that. And so I wear them all the time. And I found that it's a great way to connect with people. It's always a great conversation starter. People always kind of notice it. And for whatever reason, shoes have become part of the culture. And so it's been a great way for me to build bridges with people and have conversations with individuals. And so it's been a great way to meet people. It's been a great conversation starter. And it all started in 4th grade when my mom said, no, you can't have those. Going back to Natalie and Carly, how do we determine if the Blue Envelope program is successful? Do we have any metrics in terms of how we're going to evaluate the success of the Blue Envelope program? I think the first thing that I would say is just the number of people that we've been able to touch through this program in terms of not only the people who have asked for blue envelopes, but there's also a level of awareness that comes with these conversations, and for people recognizing that there's a lot of people in our disability community who want to go to work, who want to participate in the workforce, but oftentimes transportation is a barrier. And it's been good for me to hear these conversations because I feel like I have a better understanding of what people go through and maybe why people are reluctant to drive, and understanding that our public transportation isn't always great, and so it disproportionately impacts people in our disability community. And so I think we've definitely raised the level of awareness around these conversations as well. Carly or Natalie, do you have anything to add to how we decide if this is successful or not?
I think that one of the other metrics that helps show that is just the number of individuals and who want to expand this to their communities, and the number of communities who are also reaching out to the prosecutor's office and to IMPD to figure out, hey, how do we bring this to our community? Because I think that shows the value, and I think that shows the recognition that this is something that makes a huge difference.
I don't know if I've got much of my own say on it. Again, just hearing that, I don't know if we've done like a specific, like measurable statistic on deterring advocacy at this time, but honestly, the testimony I've been hearing from people of the hope this gives them for their children or for themselves is, for me, that speaks for itself. That's in regards to the impact we're making, though, finding a more measurable way to determine this is something I would like to do. I think would especially be helpful if we're going to advocate for this on the state level at some point.
Another question for me, it says, are you going to be on Twitter more? And if so, who are you going to tweet at? No, I'm not. I'm going to go back to not being on social media. I prefer to live in real life. And I prefer to try to solve problems, and it doesn't always happen online. So I'm going to stick away from that. The next question is about community meetings, and the conversation is basically, can we have more community meetings where we can have conversations about what's going on, and in particular conversations about crime watch and the impact that can have on neighborhoods. First of all, I want to encourage everybody, regardless of what neighborhood you live in, to become active and engaged in your neighborhood or whatever groups you associate with, because it truly is vital. I think that sense of community is something that we've lost during COVID, and I love opportunities like this to get to see people face to face, be able to talk to people, get to see how people are doing. I look forward to seeing many of you every single year to kind of see what's been going on with you for the last year. And you lose out on so many of those interactions when we don't meet and we don't get together, and I think we do lose that sense of identity and that sense of community. And so I very much want that, and I want to continue to grow that and develop that. We have an outstanding outreach team who wants to make sure that they're as active as possible in the community, and so if there's a meeting that you'd like for us to participate in, we would be more than happy to do that, and we would like to do that. Because I just think we get a lot out of hearing from what the people we serve are concerned about and what they care about, but it also helps you come up with solutions to problems. And as long as we're all in this together, saying to ourselves, problems have solutions, let's try to come up with solutions. And a lot of the solutions to the problems we face are community-based. And it starts with those community conversations. And so I'm 1000% open to it. I hope we have more meetings. I hope you invite us to your meetings so we can participate in a thoughtful discussion about how we can make our community a better place.
And there are also IMPD task force meetings, your local neighborhood association meetings, Marion County Alliance of Neighborhood Associations, meetings like this pretty much on a monthly basis.
Absolutely, and if we can be a part of it, let us know. Give it up for our panelists one last time. To make an event like this happen, there's a lot of people from the prosecutor's office who've been working overtime to do this. Before we start handing out the T-shirts, I want to give a shout out to Michael and his team. Michael, take a bow. Everybody's take a bow. Now, Michael, you're not doing this by yourself. Don't take all the credit. Who you got with you here helping us out here?
We got Marissa, the other half of the communications team, Rob Booker, part of our youth outreach, Amanda, part of our community outreach team, Clarissa, part of our community outreach team, and you guys also know she's a victim advocate in our office. We got Fletcher back here, an investigator with our office, and we got some folks up front.
Okay, those folks are Johnny and Jake. Good to see you. I know your names, even if Michael doesn't. And I got to give it up for our award-winning Miss Patton, who also goes by the stage name of Clara D. She just finished 4th in a national stand-up comedy contest. So not only is she a world-class advocate, she's also going to be appearing in a comedy special upcoming in June. So check her out on HBO, Netflix, wherever it's going to be. So there you go. And with that, I think we'd like to move over to it's T-shirt time in the city, and I think a couple of people from the office are going to help us with the names and announce certificates and hand out shirts.